Hey, what is going on, guys? Nathan here, back again with another gameplay commentary. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about school and the academic environment. In my opinion, school teaches you a couple of things very well, and it does not teach you a lot of things that are necessary for success in the workplace. And I recognize that a lot of my audience members are still at that high school to college age. And so I wanted to pass down some of my takeaways having exited that academic institution. So, for some perspective, I have about 8 months of cumulative experience in the workplace as of now. So, I'm not super experienced compared to a lot of other people in the workplace, but I feel as if I have a good enough handle on what is necessary for the workplace that I can qualify to give this advice. And one little caveat that this advice will vary a little bit depending on what your chosen area of study is. For example, if you are going to school to become a doctor, right, that's very technical, very intricate. And so that doesn't necessarily apply to my advice where I actually went to school for accounting and finance. And so that's pretty technical on the academic side, but not as technical as something like being an engineer or a doctor. So just wanted to put that little caveat out there. So the first and most important piece that I want to talk about is the ability to critically think. Now, what is critical thinking? It's essentially being able to abstract and reason your way through a problem to arrive at a solution. It's starting from zero information, finding the necessary information that you need, organizing that information, and applying it so that you can solve the difficult, intricate problem that is set in front of you. And that happens all the time in the workplace. In fact, I would argue that most of your life spent at work is utilizing critical thinking in order to solve problems, because that is essentially why quote unquote white collar workers are paid a salary, is because you wouldn't be paid this highly were it not for the fact that you are attempting to solve difficult problems that require a unique set of skills. Now, how does that relate to school? Essentially, it is my opinion, and I would argue this very vehemently, that school focuses on getting students to absorb information and regurgitate it in order to pass exams and tests. And that is just not how life works. Life is about solving problems. That is your job at the end of the day. It doesn't matter which profession you are entering, you are getting paid to help somebody solve a problem. And that is not what is taught in the academic environment, which is unfortunate. In my opinion, we shouldn't be teaching to the test, so to speak, but rather encouraging students to take on more open ended research based projects. Because if you're not in a very technical field that requires you to memorize very intricate, specific information, then the time of students is better spent on research projects where students can explore new information, can abstract new ideas, to come up with opinions on things, and then reason their way to a conclusion, because that is more of what real life is about. Now, if I'm being completely honest, I think the problem here lies in that school systems need to be evaluated on some metric at the state level in order to allocate funding or perform other administrative duties that the state owes to the school systems. And so that is probably a different discussion, but I wanted to actually read a quick passage here. There's this great book called The Global Achievement Gap by Tony Wagner. And what this book is about is essentially Tony interviewing very high level business professionals and kind of getting their opinion on what they look for in new employees, what are the valuable skill sets that new employees can have entering the workplace, and at the same time he asks them about the performance of their children's academic systems. So in this particular passage, which is only just about a half a page long, Tony is interviewing Christy Pedra, who is the president and CEO of Siemens Hearing Instruments, one of the largest hearing instrument manufacturers in the world. And she says, quote, "I ask questions for a living. The majority of my years in the corporate world have been in sales. When you're in a sales and marketing environment, it's really important that you understand your customer. I found that the best way to understand people is to ask questions. I ask questions all day long. If I ask the right questions, I get information that allows me to be more successful in a variety of ways. If I'm talking to customers, I'm more successful because I understand their business and their needs. I understand their perspective on a problem that has to be solved. If I'm dealing with employees and I ask questions, I understand how they think, where they're coming from as they try to solve a problem, and what they've done so far to address an issue. So it really comes down to how well you ask questions. End quote. And so Tony then asks her about the performance of her children's school systems. And he expected her to give a glowing review because they are apparently a part of a very elite school system. But she says, quote, they're spending too much time getting kids ready to take the Massachusetts Comprehensive Assessment System test, which is just like a standardized test in Massachusetts. And they're not measuring the right things. If you want to encourage young people to be scientists, it's not how much they can retain, but how much they can explore. It's how you ask the next question. I can look up anything, but I can't take it to the next level without pushing and exploring. And that's what I want young people to learn to do. I want them to never stop asking questions. And so that passage kind of gets to the core of what I'm trying to get at, where critical thinking is one of, if not the most important skills that can be trained in the academic environment. It's just that students need a different set of projects to work on where they are not focusing on memorizing information and regurgitating it, but rather being able to reason their way through a problem. Now, the second skill that I wanted to talk about here is the ability to learn. Now, this is a little bit different than just simply memorizing and regurgitating information, but it is taking new information that you're being exposed to and being able to internalize it so that you can leverage it at a later point in time. It is not having to ask the same question twice so that you can immediately apply your newfound knowledge. And I will say that school systems are very good at preparing students to simply learn, just because in the collegiate environment, you are lambasted with so much information on a weekly basis. And it's good that students are constantly grappling with new information. I will say in the workplace, even though I don't have that personal experience of becoming an absolute expert in my field, I would say that as you gain expertise or just gain a lot of experience in one particular area, you are probably not exposed to such a high volume of new information, although, you're still continuing to learn and adapt to the new changes and updates in your field. But the volume of new information, or I'm sorry, exposure to new information drops off a little bit there. But in the beginning, it is incredibly important to be able to take all kinds of new information, internalize it, and then leverage it for later use. And that is something that I think that tests do actually accomplish, is getting students prepared for a bunch of new information. And then, third on this list that I want to talk about, the third most important skill to learn in an academic environment is your collaborative skills. This is being able to work with complete strangers and produce an effective product. And this will happen a ton in college. You guys might find, let me back up. Those of you that are in high school will find that college and university is full of group work. You, in pretty much every class, you will be assigned a group for some type of group work. And they do that on purpose so that you can be trained for an environment in which you are not working necessarily with people that work the exact same way as you or think the exact same way as you. It's important to be exposed to a diverse group of people who have a diverse way of thinking. And that actually allows you to produce a more well rounded product in the end. And so just being able to be amicable, to socialize with your peers, and to be able to work with complete strangers is very important that you can pick up from the academic environment. So those are the three skills that I think are the most important to take away from school while you are still going through that process. And then I did make a few notes here that I just wanted to discuss some other miscellaneous items, or rather organize my information into what school is good at, what school is not good at, and how real life is a little different. First of all, I would say school is good at five or six things, right? That I've not previously mentioned. It's good at teaching you to scan for information and extract the useful parts. So much of your college career is spent basically scanning a textbook or reading new information and trying to filter through all of the noise and extract only the useful parts. Because let's be honest, a lot of content out there is just noise for what you were actually looking for, including this commentary, right? You might have clicked on this commentary for one specific piece of information, and you can kind of scrub through the video to find that. Same applies to textbooks. And that's kind of the crappy part about having to memorize chapter after chapter after chapter in order to perform well on an exam. But if you can kind of filter through all of the non important information, you will find that the chapter contents that you need to memorize is actually not that much because a lot of it is just kind of noise. School is also good at forcing you to read. This is good for you from a perspective of keeping your brain sharp and active and fast. And that is important. I do like the fact that you are kind of forced to read a lot. That is something that drops off a little bit in the workplace, but can also vary by profession. I should kind of put that caveat there, being in accounting and finance is, you're not necessarily focusing on literature because you are dealing with a lot of numbers and a lot of kind of information organization, I'll call it. But school is good at just forcing students to read because it keeps your brain sharp. The next thing that applies more specifically to universities is that universities are great at providing an environment to market yourself. And this will vary university to university. For example, my school had a great career development department where they were always bringing in employers to either help students edit their resumes or hosting career fairs, just always hosting employers on campus so that it is as easy as possible for students to basically meet with employers, because in the end employers are looking for the top talent that is at universities. They're trying to find the most productive employees that will benefit their organization the most. And so it is up to you to find those employers which hopefully, if your school is a good program, are being hosted by your university, and really kind of market yourself, put your name out there, and hand out as many copies of your resume as possible. The next item here is instilling professional etiquette. So this will again vary university to university, but one thing that my college actually heard from their feedback talking with employers is that the students from this particular university were not the sharpest in terms of professional etiquette. So that would be things as if, do you go up to somebody, shake their hand, look them in the eye? How are they dressing? Are they dressing business formal, business casual? How do they introduce themselves? What is their demeanor as they talk with people? So, those are things that you really kind of pick up with experience. But in theory, your school should be teaching you how to do these things because that is a critical piece of the workplace is just how do you come off as a professional. And finally, the last thing that I would say school is very good at is teaching students to be accountable to others. And this kind of loops back to that group work piece where you, again, will almost always be in a group for a class and doing group work. And that teaches you to be accountable to other members of your group. And I will say with full confidence that in the workplace, you are always accountable to somebody else, whether that is your boss most of the time, but you will also have, projects that you take on for other people where they're expecting a good end product, a very professionally assembled end product. And so it is learning to be accountable to others and to not really drop the ball on certain projects. So that is also one piece that I wanted to mention. All right. And so, a couple of things that school is not good at, and this applies specifically to universities because high schools are a little bit more regimented. But the first one is promoting discipline. People do fail in college because they are given an insane amount of freedom with their time. And you have to realize that you have to make a routine for yourself in which you are productive for so many hours of the day and you're advancing yourself in your schoolwork. And some people don't really understand that. They think that college is now a time to party and drink and do all of this crazy stuff. And you can definitely do that. Like I'm not like I mean I'm not saying school is a 40 hours a week activity because it definitely is not, at least for the school that I went to. But promoting discipline is a very important skill to learn because you need to organize your life in such a way where you feel good about yourself, right? You are being productive in some way. And if you don't have that discipline entering into the workplace, then you're going to come off as very sloppy. And that is not something that you want to have happen to you. And this other piece that I want to talk about that school is not good at is demonstrating the scope of experience and also how experience trumps almost everything in the workplace. And this really kind of links back to that old quote of experience is the best teacher. Now, I don't know who made that quote, but there's a lot of truth behind it. And it really comes down to the fact that you don't know what you don't know, right? If you haven't experienced something before, you don't know how to solve it on the first time. And it takes multiple iterations of doing a task in order to master that task. And so, once you have the experience behind you, you now have the ability to be much more efficient and productive in the workplace. And so, I just wanted to talk about that a little bit. But on the scope of experience piece, that actually is still kind of a surprise to me. When you enter into an industry that is particularly complex, let's take banking. Banking is a very complex financial industry. You probably are not considered experienced in that industry until you have at least 4 to 5 years of experience under your belt because there's just so much to learn. The scope of what is out there is beyond anybody's comprehension. I'm talking kind of across industries. And so when you enter into a particularly complex industry, it's going to take you more than a year to fully understand everything that is going on, not only in your company, but also kind of in the industry, and you understand sort of the full background and context of everything that is going on. And this is something that I'm still looking forward to mastering, and sort of accumulating that experience. But in school, it's weird because the most experienced person that you will ever encounter in a collegiate environment, for example, has 4 years of experience, right? People go to college for 4 years, people go to high school for 4 years. That number in college might change depending on if you're double majoring or whatever. But, right, so like the maximum amount of experience anybody has in their particular major is, let's say, 5 years. Now, again, kind of coming back to that complex industry piece, like that is not the necessary amount of time to fully understand your industry environment around you. And so it's more about like having students understand that even though it feels as if they're always advancing and moving on and becoming more senior, and you start to think you know a lot, right? You only really start to know a lot once you realize that you don't know a lot. And that's kind of what I am referencing with the scope of experience, because somebody with 20 years of experience in finance under their belt is going to know way more than you. And so it's important to kind of understand that and keep not only an open mind, but also a humble demeanor around those with more experience than you. All right, in the last section here, I wanted to cover a couple things that are just different in real life versus the academic environment. So, first of all, I would say that your learning is entirely dependent on you seeking out knowledge. In the workplace, it is a sink or swim environment. And this all again loops back to that critical thinking piece where it is up to you to find the necessary information in order to solve whatever problem is in front of you. That is different than the academic environment in which you have a professor who is handing out information, and it is up to you to basically collect that information, store it, and regurgitate it. Real life is different because it is entirely on you to ask questions, and you always have to be asking questions. And that is what you will find a lot of professors do preach in their classes, is to always be asking questions. And that probably won't make sense until you find yourself in an environment in which you are given basically no information and you have to complete a project with very little starting information. And this other item that I'm still getting used to is that school very neatly divides your life into very specific time segments. So each semester lasts between 4 to 5 months. In the workplace, work is year round. Like, you are there day in and day out, and you might have different seasons. So, for example, in accounting, you always have a busy season, or at least in public accounting, I should specify. You have a busy season between January to April. You take your summers off, and then fall and winter are normal work hours. In my position, we have very cyclical work. So a lot of our work comes around the end of the month, just because that's how our reporting kind of flows. So you have busier periods and not so busy periods. And it is hard to get used to that versus always feeling as if you're moving up some ladder. You're always accumulating credits for your bachelor's degree or whatever. You have spring semester, and then you have your summer break, and then you have fall semester, and then you have winter break. That isn't very much of a thing in the workplace. And so that can be a little hard to get used to. And then the final thing I wanted to mention here is that I want you guys to remember that tests don't exist in real life. If you are out there and you are struggling on exams, you are struggling on tests, take comfort in the fact that that shit goes away, right? Yeah, it is more about how do you solve a problem than how do you get an A on this test. And that can be a very comforting thought. And I just kind of wanted to reiterate that for those of you who might be going through tough times with regards to exams. So, anyway, that is the video, guys. That is some advice that I wanted to pass down. Take it for what you will. But I just wanted to help those of you that are in that phase of your life. And so I hope you did enjoy some of these tips. And I also hope you enjoyed this video. If you did enjoy this video, please leave a rating on it. And if you enjoy this type of content, please hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so that you can see all of my videos. And with that, I will wrap up the video. So thank you all for watching once again, and I will see you in the next video.